bad weather. The Electricity Minister, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, says the extradition of Michael Lomas shows government's commitment to tackling corruption. And President Cyril Ramaphosa will arrive in New York today to lead the South African delegation to this year's high-level gathering of the United Nations General Assembly that kicks off with the Summit of the Future tomorrow. It's just gone 12 noon Central African time. A very good afternoon to you and welcome to the Weekend Review right here in the SABC News channel. We are live to you from our studios in Johannesburg, a very chilly Johannesburg at that. In this show, we review some of the biggest stories of the week. I am Sebenzile Nkambule and we are inviting you to participate in the conversation. Give us a ring if you have a view. Our studio line is 011-714-0680, 0681 or 0682. Welcome. We start here this afternoon. The BMA announces closure of 3 ports of entries due to bad weather. Meanwhile, the Road Traffic Inspectorate says assistance is being provided to motorists stranded along the N3 Harrismith in the Free State due to heavy snowfall. The N3 between Harrismith and Tugela Toll, as well as the R617 between Kokstad and Underberg in KwaZulu-Natal, have been closed due to severe weather conditions. What you are seeing there are live visuals of backed up traffic and the incremental weather that we are seeing across the country. Rain and in some parts there, very heavy snowfall. We are in fact, we do have some reporters on the ground there. As soon as they are settled, we will in fact be able to touch base with them to get a sense on what the latest is there. Let me welcome Leshahonolo, who will in fact give us a bit more on the weather. Leshahonolo, very good afternoon to you. It's not a good afternoon for many across the country. Give us a sense of the state of the roads. We've been talking quite a lot about the N3 as well with backed up traffic, trucks stuck on the road, heavy snowfall. Give us a sense of what's happening.
And thanks for having me. Yes, I think the system started 2 days before now, with cut-off flow being over the central parts of the country, resulting in cold conditions over most parts of the eastern half of the provinces, covering the Free State, Eastern Cape, as well as KwaZulu-Natal. Now, the more severe it was last night, where we see a drop in temperatures over most parts of the high-lying areas of the Eastern Cape, as well as the western parts of KwaZulu-Natal. Now, it didn't just start there. We had now road closures from the Free State to KwaZulu-Natal. We started having reports of what started nice as oh wow, this is snow, this is beautiful, until it got to road closures to people who were traveling to KwaZulu-Natal, especially areas into mountain passes to Beckville, leading to areas Underberg, also in the eastern half of the Eastern Cape, covering Elliot, Barkley East. Now into the evening, resulting into today in the morning, early morning, we saw some snowfalls now over areas in the eastern parts of the Free State around Bethlehem. And as you've mentioned, the entry was closed, yes, but it was also, I think, R714 or areas in R74 that leads from Free State into areas around KwaZulu-Natal, as well as mountain passes from the Eastern Cape. So it was quite much more of anticipated, because we had disruptive rain as well as disruptive snow that was issued a orange level 6, which was quite significant in terms of impacts, with the high likelihood of it happening over most of these areas. Now, it's in the Drakensberg leading to Lesotho, and the question that we've been getting is more of, this is spring, what's happening, why is this? But when you have a system like a cut-off flow, it's quite a dynamical system, which results in more of colder conditions, because it's cold core on its own. Now, with this system moving over to the central parts of the country and moving eastwards, with the cold front having moved most parts of its cold left behind the country, it results in a drop in sea level, much more freezing levels, as well as a drop in temperatures, resulting in the cold that we're seeing.
And of course, we are seeing the visuals there of how intense the snow is in parts of the country. The areas that you're speaking of here, they certainly aren't new to snow. snow when we talk about the Free State, right? Very close to Lesotho as well. Has there been, though, perhaps an uptick, if you will, in the severity of the conditions that we're seeing there?
Yes, there has. I think we're in a transition, right? From winter into summer. So the transition then gets to be tricky in terms of people would say it's spring, we shouldn't get such cold conditions. But the system like a cut-off low, it occurs more in the autumn as well as in spring, especially in September. Now, when we have these systems, it's quite a cold core system, which results in a quite drastic and I'd say adverse weather. If it's not snow, you'd have severe thunderstorms. If you don't have severe thunderstorm, heavy rain that might lead to flooding and localized flooding in some areas. It's also as well as some damaging winds. In some instances, it produces some hail in some areas where it might result in some damage into infrastructure. So the areas that are there, you can mention some of the things that assist. They had enough moisture, a drop in temperatures, as well as an escarpment. So an escarpment helps with an uplift of the systems, if it's a severe thunderstorm, it will result in a more adverse and rather severity of it happening, resulting in hail. In this condition, it was dropping temperatures, quite cold, and more rain was seen, but what it had, more moisture. Now, what you need for snow is moisture and a low or rather drop in temperatures, which resulted in this. Now, in it being a transition from a cold winter, especially for the southeastern areas where we've seen the Drakensberg Mountain, they have had snow, but not as severe as what we're seeing right now. But others are saying it's the last kick of a dying horse. But with cut-off lows coming through, we are to see more and more of these impactful weather conditions.
A lot of people seem to have been caught off guard. We were just chatting just before we came on air about the heavy traffic, backed up traffic, and also the heavy duty vehicles as well, being those most susceptible as well to getting stuck. And of course, that causes problems for other vehicles as well on the roads. Should people have been aware of this, or is it perhaps a sense of, well, it doesn't look too bad, and they take the journey and then find themselves in difficulty along the way?
I mean, the South African Weather Service issued a media release 2 days prior to this happening. And in it was just specifically speaking about disruptive rain, disruptive snow and mountain passes that might be closed, and impact bays warning that was sent through, and not only limited to the Eastern Cape, it was stretching all over to the Drakensberg Mountain into Lesotho. So it to tell you how serious this thing is. And I think in much of the warnings being sent out by the South African Weather Service, it's quite good for us to get it as a public and start implementing it. So if you're seeing such thing as road closures, the thing about snow is that some people also want to have the fun part of it. People want to build a snowman. People want to experience the snow. So when you're traveling, you forget the other part of it, that the cars might struggle for you to get to those areas. So it's quite a touch and go. I don't know how to say a person should not go look for snow, but I think in it, just be cautious in doing it, because in such instances, but the ones that you'd be prepared for is if you have a truck that's scheduled to travel in a road that is expected to close due to mountain passes closing due to snow or heavy rain, it's quite good that you take the warning seriously and stop from it.
Let's bring in SABC News reporter Mlondi Radebe, who is standing by in Howick, I believe, to give us a sense of how things are looking there. Mlondi, a very good afternoon to you. Give us a sense of where you are and how things are looking there.
Good afternoon, Sebenzile. We are still here in Howick. Sadly, hundreds of trucks have been stopped here in Howick to try and make sure that they prevent them from getting to Nottingham Road where there is a snow. The provincial government is telling us that all other parts of the province of KwaZulu-Natal, like the Underberg areas, that part is also has got snow, and motorists have been stopped in those areas in Ladysmith as well as Newcastle. But I will speak to one of the motorists who will just tell us what is the situation, why is he stuck here, where he was traveling.
Uthulani wakamlifu.
Thulani, mhlawumbe ngasusichazele kafushane mhlawumbe uphumaphi uyaphi ngalesikhathi nokuthi ukumiswa kwenu lana wena ukubuka kanjani?
Besiphuma besisebenzele eStenga sesibuyele emakhaya izolo ebusuku ngo11 samiswa ama traffic cop ngapha bethu kunesnow asikwazi ukuqhubeka phambili sifike emakhaya. So ukuma kwethu lana kube nzima kakhulu ngoba iwedi yabantu nemoto ngene idumiza ubusuku ukuze kusekuseni phela nodizelo omno. So sibilo amakhaza kakhulu ke mase.
Thulani usho ukuthi kusukela izolo ebusuku ngo-11 wena umi la kuze kube yimanje mhlambe into yokudla nezinye izinto mhlambe uyidingayo njengomuntu uma ngabe usemgaqweni ngabe mhlambe uyakwazi ukuthi uzithole
ukuthi beseduzane nedolobha laseHowick ebusuku okunye kutholakele but njengama-truck nezinye imoto bevalelekile abanye abakwazanga ukuthola ukudla sina ngenhlanhla ukudla besikulungisile emva kokuthi besichazele ukuthi ngeke sisakwazi ukuqhubekela phambili semakhaya sakwazi ukuzama into yokudla ebusuku sasala sizogada ukuthi umgaqo uma uvuleka sikwazi ukuqhubekela phambili semakhaya
mhlambe kukhona i-update abaninikezayo ukuthi mhlambe kungase kwenzeke nini ukuthi nikwazi ukusuka la nikhona ningasemakhaya
hayi cha kaze sibonele ukuthi sibona phithizela nje imoto zomkhandlu nemoto zama-traffic corp but akaze sithole updates asazi kwenzakalani lokho esilindile ngesukela izolo ebusuku
mhlambe iziphi izinto ongafisa ukuyibona benazisa ngazo ngokuthi mhlambe banilekelele ngazo
mhlambe ukuthi laba abanye abaxakekile bekwazi ukuthola amanzi nanokudla nanokuthi sazi ukuthi so umgwaqo uzolunganiswa uzokwazi ukuqhubekela nini ukuhamba phambili sikwazi ukufinyelela emakhaya nalabo abahambela kude bekwazi ukufinyelela labo abaya khona
Thulani ngibona imoto enihamba ngayo nigcwele mhlambe nibangake emotweni nokuthi mhlambe nizama ukuyifudumeza ngani njengoba konje
emotweni yethu sigcwele sibo 7 but imoto ilayisha 9 khona nempahla ekhona iloko esidumisa iphinde icishwe lokho idumisa iphinde icishe sacrifice la awe load iyaduma amanye amathathi iyacishwa ukuze sifudumale ke senza kanjalo ngoba besingaqhokile besingadindele ukuthi kuzoba nalesigameko esisehlakaleni
no siyabonga kakhulu bhuti Nkosazana
ngiyabonga
Sebenzile, that was Thulani briefing us in relation to the car that they are in, that they are just 7 passengers, but they are to keep warm. They make sure that they start the car and then they use the heater for an hour and then they had to switch off the engine. But that's how the things are for them, and that they are stuck here traveling back home to Ladysmith, of which they are not going to reach Ladysmith as the snow in that area is bad and the road is closed from Balgowan. There's no other alternative route that they can use to get to Ladysmith, and they were traveling from Durban side to after work going home for the weekend. So it's going to be a long weekend for them stuck here in Howick. But what is concerning is that they're telling us that they are not updated by the officers or the municipality on when will this road be open for them to try and get home. Back to you in studio, Sebe, for now.
Thank you very much. I'm Londi. I'm looking warm. Glad to see that. And there seems to be an appreciation still, of course, joined in studio by Lehlohonolo, who is a meteorologist there. We often speak about some other phenomena that result in what is unusual weather patterns here. Of course, as South Africans, we do like to preempt spring, and we wanted to start and align with the calendar. Some people know it's a little later on as well. But is there a phenomenon that perhaps we need to be aware of currently that is leading to such severe weather conditions, particularly at a time where it's not expected?
Yeah, I think it is the cut-off low weather system that I'm talking about. It usually happens between, snow in South Africa, as I said, it's received more in August than it would be in September. But with the system like a cut-off low, during this transition period, you do get instances. The last that you can recall is about 1981 that we had September having such snow over most parts of these areas, Eastern Cape into KwaZulu-Natal. But we're seeing more and more of these systems moving into the country, and as they move into it, they result in this. So sometimes you'd have a cold front over the southeastern areas with the high pressure system pushing in the east, resulting in more of the moisture in those areas. If you're in Gauteng and most parts of the northeastern areas covering Mpumalanga as well as the Lowveld, you'd experience more of the low cloud as well as cold conditions. So these are the systems that actually are resulting in this adverse weather.
How long can we expect this to continue for?
All right, so from today into tomorrow, we're still expecting some cold as well as some showers and rain. However, tomorrow we start seeing an improvement, less of the snow that's expected. Temperatures start recovering over most parts of the eastern areas. Will still be cold. In Johannesburg, we're still expecting the maximum to reach about 17 in Pretoria for tomorrow, which results in just an improvement. Just not that much, but it's improving from 12 degrees to 17. You can start seeing the movement. Even the isolated showers and rain will just be confined to the eastern parts, covering KwaZulu KwaZulu-Natal, the eastern half of the Eastern Cape, as well as the escarpments of Mpumalanga, where we're still expecting a drop in temperatures overnight over most parts of the lying areas of Mpumalanga tonight. We might still see some snow dropping over those areas. However, it will melt by tomorrow, and you start seeing an open in roads probably in a day tomorrow or the day after.
And what's the advice to road users? Like, be on the road if you absolutely must, but if you can, stay indoors?
I think you've covered it. I think firstly, be warm in these kind of cold conditions. If you have kids, make sure they are at home and keep them warm. Have warm beverages. Keep warm, dress warm. However, don't drive if you don't need to, especially in areas like this, because it's not only snow that's in this area. We also have heavy rains. We've seen more of the accidents that happen due to these rains, especially in the eastern parts. KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape are quite more of severe in terms of the adverse weather. So most of it is to really be at home, and if you are forced to drive, just keep a minimum distance that allows you to be able to stop just prior to any impact.
All right, we'll park it there this afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. Lishahonolo Tobela is a meteorologist joining us in studio. Remember, you can also jump in and give us a ring on our studio line. Tell us how you are experiencing the cold, the snow, wherever you might be. And of course, stay safe on the roads. We have more for you on the weekend review on the other side of this. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. To this now, the Department of Labor has embarked on an inspection targeting restaurants this week. This comes just days after a raid on 2 eateries, which were found to have allegedly transgressed several labor laws, including the National Minimum Wage Act. For more on this, we're joined online here by Viwe Mlenzana, who is with the Department of Labor and is in fact the Acting Director General at the Employment and Labor Department, joining us now. Thank you very much, Mr. Mlenzana, for your time with us this afternoon. Can we expect more of these kinds of raids taking place here? And perhaps unpack for us what some of these startling findings were as you raided some of these eateries?
No, thank you very much, Sabizile. Thanks for having us. Yeah, indeed. We actually have been having ongoing inspections at the workplaces, but we have decided to also perhaps create a bit of a focus in the hospitality sector. And the reason why we have done that is because we had noticed some concerning trends in that particular sector. So for the whole week, this week, we've been focusing in the hospitality industry, and we conducted about 2,000 inspections across the length and the breadth of our country. And yes, we are concerned about what we're seeing. If I can just give you the numbers, about 47% of all the employers that we've seen about over 800 employers, and about 47% of those employers are not compliant with labor laws.
Mm-hmm. Have you received any, say tip-offs from workers who have in fact unpacked how they are being exploited essentially from working ridiculous hours from the early hours of the morning late into the night and not being compensated adequately? We hear of some cases here that they in fact weren't getting compensated by their institution, but only being able to make something from the tips that they get from the patrons at these various establishments.
Well, there are various complaints that we have received, not only this week, but over a period of time, that were suggesting to us that labor laws were not being observed by quite a reasonable number of employers. Of course, it is important for us also to indicate that it's not all employers, but there is a concerning number of employers that are not complying. So there are issues, the issues are varied, right? So obviously some of the workers are complaining about not being paid minimum wages. Others are complaining about long working hours, and some of them are not being recognized for Sunday work. and there are no contracts in place, and they are being exposed to dangerous and hazardous workplaces. So it's a whole range of them. So what have we found? Against many of these allegations, we actually found that for instance, these employers that we visited this week, about 2,000 of them, none of those that we have visited, and well, let me say a significant portion of those, that about 50% of the employers were not complying with labor laws, whether it is health and safety law, whether it's basic conditions of employment, whether it is restoration with the UIF or the compensation fund, or whether paying people in terms of the minimum wage, in terms of the Wage Act, and also, employment services law are not being adhered to. So what are the implications of this? If employers do not comply with the law, obviously, we're then going to have to enforce the law. How do we enforce the law? So it varies depending on what we have found to be non-compliant. Some of these, they result in fines. Some of these may result into imprisonment. But also equally, though, we've been conducting these inspections with our sister organizations like Home Affairs and others, and quite a significant percentage of employers that we visited are actually employing foreign nationals that are not properly documented. Now, the challenge with that is that the law is very clear in this respect, and it suggests that work occupations that can easily be occupied by South Africans should be given preference to those particular work occupations. Now, for instance, many of these jobs in the hospitality industry, it would be very hard for employers to explain why they don't sort of give preference to South Africans. So these are some of the challenges that we are seeing. And of course, also employers are not necessarily providing employees with proper safety equipment to enable them to work in safe and non-hazardous environments.
We had, in fact, invited the Restaurant Association of South Africa. They agreed to join us, but we, in fact, are yet to get a hold of them. As soon as we do, we'll bring them in on this as well. But Mr. Mlenzana, the numbers you're talking about here, are relatively high, given the number of restaurants and businesses that you went and you visited, and the fact that there are all of these violations that are taking place. What do you believe, as the Department of Labor, that is a function of? Because this is not the first time we have these conversations about the restaurant industry in particular, and their tendency for some of these businesses to hire non-South Africans because they can pay them much less, and all sorts of other labor violations that are taking place there. Is perhaps the department not monitoring this closely enough, that you have so many of these businesses that continue to take chances and in some cases actually get away with it?
Yes. So look, I think it's a phenomena that we need to deal with decisively, because clearly here it's not necessarily people that do not understand their obligations in terms of the law, but they deliberately are flouting the law, which is obviously concerning. Now, as a department, we do have capacity to address these particular issues in terms of manpower. Is it enough? No, definitely not enough. What are we doing about it? Certainly, we are looking at increasing that capacity of inspectors. Currently, we have just about 2,000 inspectors, and we want to increase that to about 20,000 inspectors, so that we can then be able to monitor and enforce the law where necessary, as it were. Now, I think there is a temptation from many employers to rather cut the corners, so to speak, by perhaps engaging in cheap labor practices. And what we do notice is that, it seems to us that it becomes easier for these employers not to comply with the laws where foreign nationals are concerned. And to this extent, we are not suggesting that foreign nationals should not be working in South Africa. To the contrary, we think that where foreign nationals bring specific skills that are critical that you do not necessarily easily find in the country. Of course, we accept the fact that employers have room, and the law allows them that to be able to attract that particular skill set. But where we are concerned is that it seems to us that the current practices that we are observing are exploitative in nature, and therefore are taking advantage of people that are desperate and would do anything as long as they can make some semblance of income. So, and that of course, that's concerning.
You say the department needs to be decisive. What do you mean by that? So you've said you want to bring in more inspectors, so capacitating that particular area. But what else? I mean, how do you make sure that the people who've been taking advantage of desperate people who need work and are prepared to take anything and have been taking chances and getting away with it, how do you actually make sure that you put a stop to that practice? We know from this particular raid as well that 2 restaurants in Tshwane were found, in fact, to owe employees a combined 1.3 million rands in unpaid wages. What does decisiveness look like in that regard in ensuring that the wages are, in fact, paid out to the workers and that the sort of practice is, in fact, stopped?
So the law provides that if an employer finds himself or herself in a situation where they're not necessarily complying with the minimum wage law, we give them a notification and for them to regularize that within a period of 14 days, failing which then they will then face some consequences. If an employer, for instance, does not comply with health and safety laws, that employer, depending on the degree and the nature of the danger, could actually be prosecuted and then end up in jail, as it were. So, I mean, does the law provide for every eventuality? Currently, we have some gaps in the law which we are addressing. There are specific amendments that we're working on as a department, particularly in the Employment Services Act, that regulates employment of foreign nationals and also young people and vulnerable work seekers. We are tightening up certain areas there to make sure that the law has a bit of a bite, so that there is more consequence that those that are contravening the law can be able to feel.
You mentioned, Mr. Mlinzana, that there were issues of, safety standards, safety concerns as well. That's from the labor lens. I wonder, these are restaurants that we're talking about here, and so consumers go into those places expecting that whether it's the food or the beverages that they're going to consume there are in fact produced, and the right standards are followed and so on. I wonder if that still is within your purview as the Department of Labor. But are you able to perhaps unpack a bit what those concerns were, or was it just from the sort of environment that workers are working in, and perhaps less about the products that patrons go in and purchase?
Well, look, I mean, it's less about the product and the quality of the product. It's more around the safety of the workplace. Give you a couple of examples. For instance, in some of the establishments that we visited this week, the ceilings are falling. In fact, it happened while we were doing the inspection that we had that kind of situation. Also, we had picked up that a number of these establishments are using gas, but some of this gas equipment is not properly installed and there's no certification for it. In other instances, it's the equipment that they're using, whether it's grillers or any of that kitchen equipment. There's wiring that is lying loose and not properly covered, which obviously presents a bit of a danger to the workers themselves. So it's more around the work environment, the workplace itself, not necessarily about the product that they produce per se.
All right. As a parting one, Mr. Mlenzana, when can we perhaps expect some action against the employers in particular from this raid who are found to have violated all sorts of labor laws?
Well, there has been already. I mean, not most, all of the 812 employers that were found not to be compliant, they've been given, sort of contravention notices, all right? And if they don't comply with those contravention notices, then obviously, then there's going to be consequences on them. So the law is obviously, already in motion, where they have been found to have employed undocumented foreign nationals, and some of those employers have been jailed together with some of those, foreign nationals that don't have the requisite documentation.
We'll park it there this afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. That was Acting Director General at the Employment and Labour Department, Viwe Mlenzana. And as I said earlier, we had in fact invited the Restaurant Association of South Africa. They had agreed, but didn't turn up for that discussion. And we do want to hear from them as well. And so should we get that opportunity, we'll get some clarity as well. Let's talk a bit of sports now. The Lions and the Sharks clash in the Currie Cup final at the Ellis Park Stadium in Johannesburg at 4 o'clock this afternoon. The Sharks are hunting their second trophy in a short space of time, but they'll have their work cut out against the home side. SABC Sports reporter Harry Olivier joins me now in studio to tell us about this much anticipated context between these two giants of South African rugby. Very good afternoon to you. What can we expect this afternoon, Harry?
Well, first of all, if we look at, I just briefly want to go back to the history of the Currie Cup. Started in 1892. Western Province was the first winner of the Currie Cup. There were only 4 teams participating in the Currie Cup. And then towards the 70s, the mid-60s, late 60s, 70s, we had Northern Transvaal dominating the competition. In the 80s, it was Western Province. And then these two teams, they came to the fore in the 90s. Now, the competition was very popular in those days. And in the 2000s as well, very popular. But I think with the advent of Super Rugby, it took a bit of a shine off the competition. It doesn't weaken the competition. I just think that there are so much rugby being played. And I think it's a general thing in sport. There's a lot of sport that we as viewers can now view. And we have to make choices. We have to make choices between our money and our time and which sport we're going to watch. So I don't think it's the competition. I still think is strong, but it's just in the crowds. We seem to think because the crowds are a bit sparse when it comes to these competitions, the quality is not as high, but the quality is definitely still top notch.
The weather, we'll talk about the weather and how cold it is across the country as well. What role do you think that's likely to play this afternoon?
I think it would benefit the Sharks a bit more than the Lions because the Lions are used to playing in dry, hard conditions up here at the Highveld, and it's normally an advantage for them. The Sharks, the cold weather is not necessarily going to benefit the Sharks, but the wet weather might. So there would be less ball in play. It's not going to be a fast-paced game. So I think the Sharks might benefit from this cold weather that we currently experience. And we're not used to. I mean, we get up in the morning and it's summer here on the Highveld, and maybe some of us don't wear jackets when we go out.
Yeah, I think a few of us forgot our jackets today. Let's talk a bit about some of the exciting players, some standout performances perhaps that we can expect from the game today. I mean, the Sharks certainly have a star-studded side as well if you think about representation at the Springbok level and so on. Are we expecting any standout performers this afternoon?
For me, in a Currie Cup final, the players that are the most important are the fly-offs for the two teams. And for the Sharks, we have Sia Masuku, who's been brilliant for them. And his goal kicking is also one of his advantages. And we saw in one of the previous games in the wet weather, he was on target the whole time. For the Lions, it's Sanele Noamba. So I think the key players there, those two will be the key players. I remember normally when you're a sports journalist, you go to a rugby game and you sit with the other journalists. So one of the nice experiences I've had in my life was in 2002, where I could just go as a spectator to a Currie Cup final. And at that stage, and it was here at Ellis Park, and Derek Hougaard was the flyer for the Blue Bulls, and he completely dominated that game. So those positions in the final, those will be the key, and I think the winner between those two, I mean, it's a 30-man game. So a lot of other factors will come into account, but if